My name is Mike J. Pudi. I'm from Light River, Nunavut. One of the things I really enjoy is hunting, especially for ring seals. It's available all year round within the range of the community. One of the delicacies we get to eat from the land. You gotta be very patient. You have to stay still as long as you can and wait for the seal to start breathing. And then sometimes it gets pretty cold without having to move at all, but I think it teaches you patience in life. When I'm not out hunting, I work full-time for this last week as a community service representative for QINIQ. And we set up accounts for people that come in to have access at their home. We've been doing this for 12 years now, and we deal with the payment that people need to pay to get their monthly fee, and anniversary date arises, and all varies on different customers when they get their modems. For me personally, I think it's great that we have internet that we can communicate with the family members that are not in the community. Sometimes we don't get to see them face to face for a long time, especially isolated communities, and we are able to sort of keep in contact with them on a daily basis. So it's very important being able to have access to the whole world.
I would like to welcome everybody to today's roundtable event, Bridging the Digital Divide, the Broadband Challenge in Canada's Arctic, sponsored by Contech. Now, before I start introducing the panelists, I would like to mention a few housekeeping details. There is a question and chat function that I would encourage you to use, so please ask questions throughout the session. We will try and answer all the questions, time permitting. Most importantly, don't forget that once the roundtable is finished, you have the opportunity to hop over to network with the panelists and other attendees. For those of you who are already set up meetings, you can check your planned meetings via the agenda tab. For those of you who are not set up meetings, you can use the impromptu live meetings tab. Now let me start introducing the panelists. First, Jeff Phillip, founder and CEO SSI Canada, is a dynamic leader and innovator. He has spent over 30 years in the family business, the Snowshoe Inn, growing and extending its activities to build 3 company divisions: SSI Canada, SSI Energy, and SSI Products. Our next panelist is Tony Lomas, Sales Director North America for Contech. With more than 30 years of experience in the telecoms and satcom industries, Tony previously worked in various product management and network solutions roles. And finally, Richard Sword, who will be joining us for the Q&A part of the roundtable. Richard is Senior Vice President, Premium Enterprise and Mobile Operators for Contech. In this role, he leads the market development and direction for the telecom and enterprise markets, directing long-term strategic initiatives and defining solution suites and feature sets. Welcome, gentlemen. I'd like to start with Jeff. SSI launched the QINIQ broadband network in all 25 Nunavut communities in 2005, very remote communities in Canada's Eastern Arctic. What were some of the biggest challenges that your team had to overcome?
Just about everything is a challenge when you're building in the Arctic or in any of the really remote, unserved areas. So I think there's a lot of the challenges that probably maybe seem obvious to many, and that is logistics. You have 1 sea lift a year, maybe 2 in some communities. You have 1 chance a year. There's no roads. There's a couple of flights a week on a small airplane that wouldn't be able to bring any large equipment in, any antennas in. So you have 1 sea lift a year. So logistics certainly is a challenge. And timing, obviously, you have to be ready for sea lift. You have to have your equipment ready. And then you get into the less obvious ones, like who in the community is going to receive your freight. because there's no freight agent, there's no warehouse. You've got a piece of property with a chain link fence, theoretically, that is going to keep it secure, and you're going to have all of that freight moved to that location. And you're going to have it there so that when you arrive later with your crew by aircraft, you can do the work. And then you get into the challenges like 6 feet of snow show up between now and when you get there, and you had not put 12-foot poles on each crate to know where they all were with numbers so that you could dig out the one you needed first, and you end up having to dig the entire yard out to find all of your pieces, because some are very small crates sitting on the ground, because it seemed like a fine idea in summer. So those are the obvious ones. Snow encompassing your entire enclosure to where the fresh air intake is covered under 8 feet of snow, as is the rest of the building, so that the thing just has to shut down. So there are a lot of those challenges. Human resources, not having the skills on the ground, cost. Those ones people don't really think about, the cost of power, $1 per kilowatt hour. And to give you an example, I think the blended rate in Ontario is probably 17 cents. So you're paying a phenomenal amount for power, transportation, heating in winter, backbone capacity, right? Satellite backbone capacity, which is part of the point of this discussion too with Contech, was how do you most efficiently deliver the highest amount of bandwidth for the least amount of cost operationally, both in power, but also in maintenance, in sparing. So yeah, lots of those challenges. And you know what? They're not much different than Africa or Indonesia or the South Pacific. It's just a hell of a lot colder, and you have a much shorter operating season. And we did work in the South Pacific in north of Fiji. And I remember presenting to the board of TSKL, Telecom Services Kiribati Limited. And I said to them, you know what the difference between Nunavut and this is? You've got 15 islands with 40,000 people, no roads between them. We've got 25 little communities, no roads between them. But you've got 40,000 people. We've got 37,000 people. You've got satellites right overhead on the equator, little wee dish. We've got satellites at -5-degree look angle to see the geostationary birds, and they're 4.5 meters. They got $100,000 worth of concrete to hold them to the ground. We've got a 4-month construction season. You've got a 12-month construction season. We've got very expensive freight. You got cheap freight, ships all over. So that's how I know that your business case, and that's exactly what I said to them, that's how I know your business case will be fine, because I know the business case for Nunavut, and if we can do it there, we can do it here. And we did, actually. We went back and we built in Kiribati and Africa and Indonesia. And so those challenges exist everywhere, but they certainly are tougher in the North and South poles, where your temperatures are so much colder.
Yeah, this project is an interesting project, because we talk about the digital divide, and we'll come to that later on in the questioning. But what was the driving force behind this network, and have you achieved what you set out to at the very beginning?
Yeah, we absolutely have. You know what? Well, I should say it's never going to be finished. What was the driving reason? I grew up in a little town of 800 people, 98% Indigenous. I have an Indigenous brother and sister older than me. And you know what? We lacked all of these services in my little town. Internet was dial-up at $1 a minute, and you're lucky to get 9,600 baud, for those that still remember those types of terms. Internet in the Arctic over satellite, trying to do dial-up over satellite. I was on a terrestrial network in the south. I was lucky in my little town of Fort Providence. We were on the road system to the south, but in the Arctic was a challenge. And what happened was the NWT Power Corporation, the power company in the north, in the Northwest Territories, this is before Nunavut was even formed, when it was just one territory, was looking for a way to extend their data connectivity to their branch offices for better management. They wanted to install SAP. And we were brought in to do a business case to determine if it was viable for them to build and operate their own network. And having done the business case and knowing the satellite connectivity piece very well, we entered into a joint venture with the Power Corp, and we built the network bigger, and we agreed that we would deliver internet in these communities and manage the network for them, and they would get the benefit of having a managed network, but at cost, because they were a partner in it. And it was in their facility, so it was in the Power Corporation's yard in every community initially where we built these dishes. We since expanded out, and we no longer have that joint venture with the Power Corp. We own all of the assets, and we have for a long, long time. But that's what got us into the Arctic. It was a need for connectivity. It was seeing that we could solve that problem. We understood it very well. And it's not just a hardware problem. It's a business case problem. It's a billing and provisioning problem. It's a, how do you have an agent in a community with lots of your inventory and a commission structure and a payment structure, and it's very cash economy. So it was a challenge. And have I achieved it? Yes, we have LTE, voice, data, broadband services in every community in the Arctic at the same price. And that was important to us, that all 25 communities were treated as one. So that the little community where I grew up in, for example, the one of 800 didn't get left by the wayside. So we, right from the very beginning, determined that it was going to be the same price at the same service level in every community, or we weren't going to do it. And we have local agents in every community that get a percentage of that revenue. So yeah, we've achieved it. The challenge now is how do we get enough capacity in to deliver a better service? Because I'm not happy with the level of service we deliver. I'm happy with the technology, the network, the infrastructure, the people, the reliability, the performance for what we have done. But we've been squeezing blood out of a stone to get enough bandwidth. It's hard.
Well, we're going to bring in Tony shortly to talk about the ground segment and offer his opinion. But there's one last thing I want to tackle, Jeff. The key services to the remote region. You know, what has excited you most? Which service that you've delivered?
You know what? It's connectivity is the answer, right? It's not a specific service. We're building new services right now. And what I mean by that is we have a team of software developers that are world-class. All of our billing and provisioning systems we built ourselves because we had to. There was no system you could go and buy that would, you know, if you phone some vendor up and say, I've got 25 communities, average is 1,000 people, and you know, it's going to be a cash, non-English, no contract, pay-as-you-go service. I need a billing system for it. It's complicated. So we've written those. We're developing new services that specifically work in constrained backbone environments, things like this video conferencing platform. The problem is it all goes to the cloud, which means if we're all in one remote community, we're all sending our video to the cloud and then back to each other, even though we're sitting across town from each other. It's very, very bad for resources on the network, especially constraints. So we're building our own clients for this. But what I think is the most important, I mean, those are all verticals on top of a critical infrastructure, which is connectivity, right? We don't have roads, we don't have bridges, we don't have the same costs as Southern Canada for maintaining these little communities. I mean, think about maintaining any community in the country where you have roads and bridges and public infrastructure. We don't have much of that. What we have as our road is backbone connectivity, right? It's how people communicate, it's how we get our goods and services, how we educate, it's how we build our businesses, we sell and trade, we bank. So that connectivity needs to be improved, and the services will just flow, but we need better backbone.
Right. Tony, it's time to bring you into this conversation. Contech has played a crucial role as a partner in the ground segment, but what have you supplied to enable the platform to deliver faster speeds and better user experience?
Well, we did a combined solution of our Contech CDM 760 modem and our Memotech FX and HX network appliances. The HX does carrier bonding, which enabled us to create larger links than were available. We can bond the channels together and then apply TCP acceleration to improve the user experience to create an experience more like a terrestrial link. So you're not affected by the overall latency of the satellite links themselves. But the channel bonding technology takes multiple carriers and creates a single IP link over the satellite so that we can create larger capacity links than are typically available.
So Jeff, you know, why did you partner with Contech? You know, why did you select them? And the gear that Contech have put in, you know, how has it improved the QINIQ network?
Well, like Tony said, you know, the bonding was a big thing. TCP acceleration is critical for anyone that builds broadband networks over high latency links, like 700, 600 millisecond latency links. Without TCP acceleration, you hit an IP throughput bottleneck that you can't overcome otherwise. So we had years and years ago, I don't remember when, I think maybe it was 8 years ago, we put in a very large Cisco platform for TCP acceleration across all 25 communities. It was millions of dollars. And it was getting a little long in the tooth, and it wouldn't handle a lot more throughput. And so really the decision last year was, do we nurse it along? Do we nurse along the Cisco TCP acceleration platform, the Waves platform it's called, which really was not designed for satellite specifically, but it worked. I mean, it did what we needed, and it was designed for larger links, so we could not use that again. We started looking at all kinds of other platforms that would be able to handle the kind of throughput that we could put through with channel bonding and with far more capacity. So really 3 things happened at once. We were looking at bringing on significantly more capacity in space. We needed a method of deploying it more efficiently, our modem technology that we were using. And we had used Contech in past on some other links, some KA links, and are happy with the product. It's a solid workhorse product. It's been around a while, but it is a good workhorse, could handle the throughput. So it's a combination. We brought on more capacity. That meant going out to all 25 of our communities and doing upgrades. And while you're there, because logistics and people and HR, getting people into those communities, especially in the middle of COVID, this is a year ago now, right? This was in the middle of COVID and Nunavut was in lockdown. So to send 5 field techs to every community and repoint antennas and install new electronics in a 20-day period in January, in the coldest, darkest month, was an extraordinary project. And so we didn't want to go halfway. If we're going in there, we're going to put in new modems, we better replace the accelerators as well. And so really that's where Contech shined. It was, and I had this discussion with Tony many times. I said, you know what, Tony, I'm really stuck here because I'm looking at a $1 million Band-Aid, let's say, and I'm looking at your solution and there's a big gap, right? And this is an easy one right now, but that's the one we really want. It just gives us more capacity to grow. So that's why we went with them. It's a good product.
Well, when you do these type of projects and you're looking for partners, you need to understand each other's methodologies. Did this present any challenges to SSI and Contech, Tony?
I think it was really interesting because this happened in such a short time space that from the manufacturing and delivery of the equipment, I was in awe of what the engineering team from SSI was able to do to accomplish that deployment in such a short period of time and get it all up and running. Their team was incredible to get all that equipment out to all those communities and then get the teams going, community to community and get them all up and running. And it was all done in such a short period of time. It was incredible. I think the logistics was, it really showed where SSI's experiences really came into play there to be able to achieve it.
Yeah, well, Richard, to give you the summary of that, if you saw the war room, the boardroom in the Canada office, and the scratches on that, which was we staffed that 24/7 for the period of this project because it was just that critical. We had 2 million square kilometers to cover. We had 25 remote sites in January. We ordered the equipment from Contech, I think in October, I think was sort of a time frame when I said, okay, Tony, we're going to do this thing. We've made the decision. We've got clearance from the chief medical officer that we're going to be able to fly through Nunavut in January. We've made some of the arrangements. We've chartered a 737 to get our crew and our freight from Ottawa to Iqaluit. We've chartered 3 King Air with 3 crew to be able to move our 5 field techs to these communities as fast as possible, because we had to get to everyone and repoint 36 big 4.5 meter C-band antennas in the cold dark of January, taking services down, complete new RF plan with far more capacity. The hubs had to be repointed. All the new gear in the hub had to be staged and built and deployed without ruining the existing network, but be ready to cut over at a moment's notice. So we shut down Christmas for a lot of staff, and it caused a lot of heartache across our network for our customers. We refunded $250,000 worth of our customers' fees for the period of time that they were out in any given community. It was phenomenal. It was by far the best executed project we've probably ever done, and we've done some amazing projects, but the team certainly outdid themselves, and Contech was a big part of that, getting us the equipment just in time, right? We had no room for any mistakes on that, and everyone did it safely. That was really critical to us.
Well, I'm going to sort of backtrack a bit here, because we talked about this on the intro. You know, when we hear a lot about the digital divide, but we don't expect the digital divide in the region that you've been operating in. What does it actually mean? You know, we bandy around this digital divide phrase, but what does it actually mean, Jeff?
You know what it means? That, I remember the day that we got the first fax machine in our office, the family business, the Snowshoe Inn, which is the business that started this. That's what SSI stands for, is the Snowshoe Inn. And I remember that black and white thermal fax machine, and it was a godsend, because now I could get specifications from dealers in Edmonton, computer resellers in Edmonton, because we were a computer reseller 30 years ago before we started the telecom side. We were Gateway 2000's distributor in Canada near the end of it before I got out of that. But I remember I'd have the yellow pages for Edmonton, and you were lucky if you had managed to steal a yellow pages from a hotel room somewhere in the south on your way through, because that was the only way to find a company, right? Is you went to the computer section of the yellow pages. There was no Google it, look it up online. Or you could phone the operator and say, I'm looking for, and they would look through the listings. It was crazy. So this is the early 80s. And so me being able to have phone up a company in Edmonton and say, have you got this? And they'd say, yeah, I'll send you the specs, right? That was the start. And then email. So getting communications out there is critical for communities. If you want, our human resources, right? Our people are really the most critical asset. And as Canadians, I hear this a lot, having gone to school in Southern Canada, because in my hometown, the school only went to grade 7. So from grade 8 to 12, I went away to Vancouver Island to a boarding school. And I got to meet a lot of people from around the world, and a lot of people in Canada as well, that thought, why are we paying for internet? Why are we subsidizing getting internet into the north? What's the point of that? 2/3 of Canada's landmass represents this massive area up north, that if we want to claim that as Canada, we want the natural resources, the oil and gas, the rare earth minerals, all of that, the Northwest Passage. We have to have people, we have to have a footprint, we have to have infrastructure. And that's what Nunavut are doing across Nunavut, is they are providing Canadians with the right to claim Nunavut is part of Canada, but we do nothing to make their life there possible. Right? The price of food is ridiculous. Energy is ridiculous. Housing is in short supply. Communications are extremely expensive, even with the amount of money that we've invested, 160 million since 2005 in Nunavut's 25 communities. We still don't have good enough infrastructure. So I can't even remember what the damn question was, Richard. But that's the answer.
It was actually, but the phrase, the digital divide, what does it mean? But I think you've pretty much answered that, Jeff.
You know what? I want to add 2 things to it, actually, that are really important, and I don't want to lose sight of this, because it's about the people, right? Inuit, Indigenous people in general, I think, especially even in my own community, but Inuit are a very vocal culture, right? They pass their stories down generation to generation. And when Inuit become separated by great distances between their communities with no roads, or when they get separated from their traditional, very tight igloo type growing up into small little houses across town from each other, which is what our government tradition has been, to build a whole bunch of affordable houses, but spread them all out. And so we've lost a lot of that culture, right? And what communication brings, what the digital divide causes, is that kids, multi-generational, are not able to communicate with other kids, like-minded kids in other communities, because there's only X numbers, 800 in my community. And it's very, very important growing up that kids have a vast experience, right? I mean, that's a big part of me growing up. My father was from East Germany. I spent a lot of time in East Germany before the wall came down, before I was 12. So that had an impact on me growing up in a small Indigenous community, but I could travel and I could communicate with everyone. The digital divide is for me, it's traumatic, right? Residential schools separated kids from their families, and we are re-traumatizing kids these days because the kids in these communities can't afford to communicate with other kids outside their community, or even sometimes within their community. It's dark and cold many months out of the year. And the cost of that connectivity, even for education or culture, is so high that we are doing this all over again. We need to solve that. This is a solvable problem. We need to just say, okay, we're gonna solve this problem. We're gonna put that amount of capacity in dollars, but it's not a big number. We're just doing it so piss poor in 4-year political cycles that we don't really look at a long-term solution. We look at kick the can down the road, and it can't keep going. It is re-traumatizing kids in communities now. That's the end of that story. Long one.
Jeff, I'm just going to bring in Tony because I'm sure he's got a view on this.
Well, it's kind of hard. This was an eye opener for me. I'm in the South. I'm in an urban area of Canada, and we can get fiber optic into the house and get a 500 megabit link for $100 a month. Even if you had $100 a month up in those communities, you just cannot get that type of connectivity. And it's only being mandated now by the Canadian government with their universal broadband fund that provides some funding to be able to get 50 megabit downloads to these communities. That's only started to happen in the last couple of years, Jeff. And it's through projects like SSI's here that they're able to provide some of these facilities up there. But it's, they're trying to do, that's only one part of what they need to really, change this digital divide between, the north and the south of Canada, or remote communities.
Rural Canada, yeah.
Yeah, rural Canada is facing the same challenges of there's just no infrastructure there to get it. They're trying to get fiber up to a lot of these communities, but they can't run, the fiber all the way up there and get to all of these remote communities. And the only access available is over satellite. And it's taking time.
Well, Tony, look, it's critical, this satellite network, but why is the capacity such a challenge? Why not give them as much as they need?
It's in a lot of these cases, and Jeff can talk about this too, is that you just can't get the capacity up there. There's limited satellite capacity to get available up there, and where funding like the Universal Broadband Fund from the Canadian government will cover initial equipment expenses. They don't typically, it's not an operating expense that gets covered. They have to self-fund a lot of the monthly operating expenses that go along with these type of networks, and that's tough for a lot of those communities. I mean, Jeff has got a lot of programs that he's put out there to help finance these for these communities, but it's it's a struggle. It's certainly a struggle. I think the Canadian government's been, releasing some funding, but they certainly haven't opened the bank vault to provide annual operating cost coverage for these community networks.
I'll give you a perfect example. In this project we're talking about that we just finished with Contech, we did this a year ago. There was no federal funding. They came out with a program a year ago about this time called the Rapid Response Program, and we applied to that as well, because the previous programs, the CRTC's funding rounds, they have not made a decision on yet. So there, last summer in June, federal funding for consumers in Nunavut ran out, and we carried the cost of that network. Our company did. And when October came, it was either shut down 4,000 to 5,000 homes because there's no federal funding and your program has run out and you haven't initiated a new program yet, and we can't afford to continue to do this, or spend a lot of money and go all in effectively on transitioning our network to a new provider at a better price that we could afford to keep those consumers on Still can't increase capacity, but we could keep them on, but then commit a bunch to Contech. So to put this in perspective, that project was a $40 million investment with a $4.9 million contribution by the federal government that only came through in the last 30 days. So I committed $40 million this time last year, hoping for something through this, and we did get something, but frankly, that's the challenge. It's that we're not looking at, Tony mentioned there's not enough capacity in space. Why isn't it in space? Because we're not committing to it. Why aren't we committing to it? Because everyone thinks it's just going to be there when we need it, and yet satellites take years to launch. And now everyone's going, well, we're going to get fiber. Government of Nunavut's bringing fiber in. Go to our website and have a look on SSI Canada, or it might be under the QINIQ in the news section there, or documents. We've got a white paper we did on the impact of transitioning to fiber. Because if we don't think about this transition to fiber, we're going to mess a lot of things up. Like what happens when the government of Nunavut in Iqaluit switches from a 500 meg geostationary 700 millisecond latency link to a 4 gigabit low latency link? It's great. It's great for the whole community. It's great until the link breaks, because it's not a loop. And when it breaks, what is the backup strategy? What's the satellite that's got 4 gig available when we were eking out as much as we could out of the C-band ones that are end of life, right? Or the next one that just went up, SES-17 just launched, SES launched SES-17. It has a Ka-band payload. I spent a lot of hours this last week with SES on that payload, on how we will engineer that payload into our network, because that's been planned for 3 years now between SES and SSI Canada. I was in Luxembourg literally 3 years ago planning that. So we plan to have capacity, but has the federal government planned to have capacity over Canada, over rural Canada, or are we all just hoping fiber is going to come someday? That's the problem. And now we're all hoping that Starlink's going to solve the problem. And look, I love Starlink. I'm a loyal Elon fanboy through and through. And this technology is working amazingly well. I'm on it right now. I have been for the whole duration of the discussion. But it's not going to solve the problems. It's not solving the big capacity. It's not terabits of capacity into a community with a horizontal LTE or 5G, 4G, 5G distribution. It's an end user, an endpoint connectivity mechanism. Unless you have a job, have a credit card, have a billing address, and are willing to pay for the terminal and put it on your roof and maintain a monthly subscription, which is none of our customers predominantly, right? I mean, we're 70% of residents. This is an important factor. 70 some percent of homes in Nunavut have QINIQ broadband. You can't claim that about probably any province or territory outside of Nunavut. 70% of homes have an active monthly account with our broadband. And there's also Bell and a few communities in Northwest Hell. That's huge penetration. It's a massive, massive thing, the digital divide we've talked about. So we need more forward thinking, long-term thinking. SpaceX is part of it, but you know what? There are other things as well, like MEOs that SES are proposing, LEOs that Telesat are proposing, which are a little higher throughput even than what SpaceX is doing now. But this industry is in for a wake-up call, a big shake-up in the satellite industry in the next few years, between the MEOs coming to market, what SES is doing, what OneWeb is doing, what SpaceX is doing. It's going to be interesting.
Well, I'm sure that's going to elicit some questions later on, and we'll come back to that. But the success of this project in the Eastern Arctic proves that with your vision and determination, remote communities can be connected. The two of you, Contech and SSI Canada, have worked really well on this. Are there any plans to collaborate on other projects?
Tony doesn't know this yet, so we probably shouldn't speak about it with him on the call. But yeah, no, as Tony mentioned, the Universal Broadband Fund, we have a couple of proposals in front of them. We also have a big project in Northern Quebec, a partnership with the James Bay Cree, a very successful project that has been 2 years in the making. We're just launching this week, actually Thursday. We launched the first 5 of 15 new markets that we're deploying LTE cellular in. It's all fiber terrestrial, fiber connected there, but it's with Cree partners, and I'm very excited about it. But in the Universal Broadband Fund applications for Nunavut and other areas that we have submitted, the plan certainly is to bring a lot more capacity to bear. As Tony mentioned, it's expensive. I'll give you a context. To watch a 1 hour Netflix episode at standard definition would cost you $9. $9 for one episode of 1 hour, right? That's the usage cost. If you've not gone over, if you go over, if you're within your cap, it's less per gig, but you're paying $80 a month for not a lot of gigs, and every extra gig is $10. And people say, well, how is that possible, right? Well, in the south, where we're building in Quebec, we can find fiber at between, call it $10 and $15 a megabit per month, right? So if you got to deliver 3 megabit to a customer, which Tony brought up the Universal Broadband Fund objective of 50 meg down and 10 meg up per person, per household. Well, that's 60 megabit, but it's at a 20 to 1 over subscription. So it's really only 3 megabit of dedicated capacity. On fiber, that's 18 to $30 per month. So if I'm selling it for 60, I've got some margin there. Over satellite, it used to be $1,000 a megabit. So you'd be at $3,000 a month for that subscriber that's going to pay you $80. And unless there's a $2,920, federal subsidy, that only covers the raw cost of capacity. That's not electronics, that's not power, that's not maintenance, that's not travel, that's not agents. So let's say you brought it down to $100 a megabit, which would be unheard of in the satellite industry. You still need $300 as an input cost for the bandwidth. And then if it's geo, you got latency, you got to put in all this extra hardware, which has a big cost for evergreening. Now, LEOs and MEOs are going to change. We saw this with WorldCom when fiber went nuts, right? Price of satellite tanked, and then WorldCom tanked, and a bunch of other fiber tanked, and satellite went back up. LEOs and MEOs are going to bring the cost of capacity down because we will have a glut in rural areas, which means we should be able to get it down. Now, $10 a meg, 15, I hope so. And because it's low latency, that now means we can really truly bridge this digital divide. We really can if we can get it down to the price of fiber, but it has to be. Otherwise, the consumer has to pay more, or the feds have to pay more. So then the next challenge, and I'll end with this, is not just the price of capacity. It's what does the federal government consider an eligible expense in your submission? So as Tony said, they cover a lot of the capital costs. They don't cover the cost of power. That's supposed to be a non-issue, a rounding error. We spend $1.5 million a year in 25 communities on power. We give $2 million a year almost to the agents in the communities as part of that revenue sharing, because we have to, right? If we want an agent in the community that speaks Inuktitut, that has 4 or 5 handsets, that when you walk into their home office, they can hand you a handset and activate you right now on a monthly plan, or hand you a SIM card. We can do that in their language, in their community, in whatever currency they want. Frankly, they could barter with the agent. I'll shovel your sidewalk off if you give me an extra month of internet. And the agent actually, through our provisioning system, can do that. So the challenge is, what's the eligible expenses? We need training dollars because we want to create local jobs, right? We need to subsidize the cost of operating these things, not just the cost of putting the hardware in. Otherwise, they're not sustainable. I think those things are slowly getting through to people, but there isn't enough money in the Universal Broadband Fund right now to do what we need to do across the country. Once mid-Earth orbit and low Earth orbit are truly everywhere, and you can drop a 20-foot container in the middle of any community and pop up an LTE tower and stick a dish on the roof, then we'll solve the digital divide, right? Then it'll be cookie cutter, and we're very close. Well, we could do that now, and LEOs will allow us to do that in the rest of the world. But my focus and our passion has been on solving that problem in the Arctic, in the north, not the Arctic, the north.
Well, let's bring in Tony here. Jeff is very enthused about working on other projects with you, Tony. How does Contech feel?
Looking forward to it. As you can see, Jeff is a exciting person to work with, and we look forward to a lot of projects. And hopefully we can meet the business case requirements for every single one of the communities that need these services.
Well, let's be a little bit more serious now. The pandemic, we can't ignore the pandemic. It required people to work and study from home. Tony, how resilient was the network to the increased bandwidth pressures?
Well, from the point of view, I think at the size of these communities, I think that the bandwidth requirements were well met. I think it's more of a operational question for Jeff, really. from our point of view, I mean, we provide optimization, we provide the dynamic load balancing across all the links so that any changes in any particular traffic flows are going to be adapted for. But the overall impact on the whole network is really something that would be something Jeff would see.
Jeff?
I think, you know what, certainly the network has handled very well the growth. I mean, we 3x'd the backbone capacity as part of this upgrade, and it made a big difference to our consumers. And you know, a lot of them won't have a clue. They'll just still be mad about the fact that they don't have enough usage. But the oversubscription at peak busy hour, because oversubscription went down because we 3x'd the bandwidth, everybody's service level went up. So it's been good, but we also tend, to be totally honest, we always push our vendors and suppliers hardware to the limits. I mean, we do have a sharp team of engineering talent that really understands well our challenges and how to make that hardware perform as best it can. And I would say right now we're doing the best we can with the C-band capacity available over the Arctic. The upgrade to KA and LEO will certainly improve the network further. And you know, you brought on at the beginning, Richard, you mentioned the other divisions in the company, and I want to just touch on one very quick story. Canada C3, if you're familiar with it, that's where one of the big projects that Canada did for its 150 was called Canada C3, and it was to take an ex-Coast Guard boat and to sail it from Toronto all the way up through the Arctic and down to Victoria in 150 days, touch 150 communities, bring scholars, educators, students on board from each little port and make it into something really special, and sharing culture and knowledge. And you know, we had a truth and reconciliation room, or there was a room on the boat called the Truth and Reconciliation Room, to help people that come on the boat understand about residential schools and what sort of some of our history is that's not so well known. And I grew up in a town which had the largest residential school and one of the first ones in the Northwest Territories. Fort Providence did. And my sister went to that residential school, so I know a bit about it. And I got off the boat, so we put the communications on the boat. This was the first time it had ever been done where you could connect an icebreaker that was going to go through the Northwest Passage and have full connectivity the entire way from Toronto to Victoria. And so we put a full tracking satellite dish on the roof of that boat, or on a big column that we had to build on it, and put the capacity in place. And I remember going on from Igloolik all the way up to Resolute and down to Cambridge Bay. And when I was in Resolute and with this, it shocked me that there's LTE everywhere. We've solved this technical massive problem of putting in a cellular network, ubiquitous, same price everywhere at a great price. The services are awesome for the cost that we have to deliver them. And yet the food and the housing and the job crisis was looming large every step across town, right? You'd see kids and, you know, they don't have the kinds of infrastructure and services and playgrounds. You see hunters that will tell you that, you know, food insecurity, which is the white man's way of saying starvation, is a real thing when you don't have bullets and a gun and gas to go out on the land to hunt something. And the animals are not close to town, right? They're way out there. And so, and houses are so crammed, and because the power infrastructure is so old, you can't build more housing. So all of these problems really drove me nuts on this trip. And that is one of the catalysts for the energy division, which is something I've been doing my whole life, longer than telecom. It's been off grid and in energy, but I could apply that knowledge. And that's where the product side, I mean, we're a distributor in North America for some very innovative technology that just didn't exist here before, that we will be deploying, if we're successful across many of these communities, to solve the food, the housing, and the job problem and the energy problem. So that's my next magic trick, our next magic trick, the companies.
Well, gentlemen, before we open up the floor to questions from the audience, finally, what are the plans to upgrade the network and introduce new services?
KA, we got to go to KA, Tony. We're going to be talking about that shortly.
Yeah, that's where the capacity is going to be available. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they just launched SES 17, successfully launched last week. It'll take a while to get into orbit, but there is 5 gigabits of capacity available that we could bring in over Nunavut. There's umpteen more tens of gigabits across what I call the mid-north, from the 55th parallel to the 60th. There's a couple hundred communities there with no service. And we should be dropping in a cookie cutter solution on KA, moving to LEO, or whatever the cheapest backbone solution is, right? I'm not stuck on SES 17. It just happens to be that in Nunavut, there is no other comers anytime soon, right? And it's going to be in service by summer, spring.
Well, thank you. Let's open up the floor to some questions. We haven't got Jeff with us, but if any questions are directed at Jeff, we will follow up with those later on. But we have got some questions coming in, so let's crack on to this, because we have about 15 minutes, I would say. Tony, you first. How difficult was it to put together this solution in such a short period of time in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, it was definitely challenging, for sure. I mean, we have our manufacturing facilities down in Tempe, Arizona, and our manufacturing and production teams that are based down there did an incredible job building, testing, packing, and shipping every piece of equipment for this network. We do all our manufacturing for the Contech EF Data and Memotech product lines out of that factory. So every piece of equipment was built, tested, and shipped from there to SSI's facilities. And then during the pandemic, with all the challenges that brought up, and once it got up there, everything had to be pre-configured and packaged by the SSI team in conjunction with our Memotech support engineering team, who helped come up with the configurations for all of the devices, supported SSI in the pre-configuration of all these units. And then, when they got out to each of the individual communities, we had to, provide any, support for any issues that might have popped up during the installation phase as well. It was a great effort by all the teams at Contech and SSI.
Richard, let's bring you in on this. This application, how can it be transferred to other communities around the world?
Well, sadly, Nunavut is far from being the only underserved community in the world. There are a number of reports studying this from United Nations, ITU, World Bank, and I, for one, like to lean on one specific study coming from the GSMA, the GSM Association of Mobile Operators, for much of our strategic planning. And it points to the fact that there are 3 billion people around the world that lack broadband connectivity today. And a further 600 million or so has no connectivity at all, not even for a voice call or texting. So looking globally, there are a number of reasons why people are not connected, and those include things like literacy rate, digital skill, knowing how to connect and what are the benefits for me by being connected, and social issues like gender equality is still a problem in some communities around the world. But it's common across all these research and studies is affordability of the service is the number one reason for the digital divide, both when it comes to getting a device to get online, to get access to the network, but also the cost of the monthly service plan that Jeff was talking about earlier. And this is where our focus has been centered around for these types of solutions, and why we think this is important. It is about delivering a robust and cost-efficient connectivity solution that address the unique challenges these communities are facing. And whether it's far North Canada or the Amazon jungle or an Indonesian island, as Jeff was on earlier, or in the heart of Africa, a solution must drive down cost of the service while still being easy, robust, and simple to install and operate for the service provider. And that is what we offer and can replicate in any market.
Well, we've got a question that's come in. I'm not sure which one of you wants to answer this. Some providers fighting the digital divide suggest community Wi-Fi is the solution. Is that a strong strategy, or are there flaws those providers are glossing over?
No, I think that is a great strategy. I mean, anytime you can aggregate traffic, and Wi-Fi is one great solution of aggregating traffic for many users, and share the cost of the satellite connectivity coming out from that aggregation point, you get benefits. The same model works so well with 2G, 3G, LTE as well, because you're able to get many people to connect at the same time, bringing on their own devices to connect to the network in a very cost-efficient manner. So that is a fantastic model that has proven to work in many, many locations.
Well, another question that's come in, it's with regards to Telesat's upcoming Lightspeed LEO service. Is that a solution to bridging the digital divide?
My view that there are many different solutions that needs to come together to help bridge the digital divide. It's not only one solution. So I'm very much in favor of any solution that can bring more connectivity at the lower price, at the good quality that people can afford. Bring it on. It's good for the community. The goal at the end of the day is to get people online and communicate and get them access to the internet. I mean, communication is a basic human need, you know.
Yeah.
And the more people we can get online, the better it is for everyone.
Well, we all know Martin Coleman, and he's watching this quite closely. And he's made a comment about SpaceX and thus Starlink springing to mind. He's saying that he notes with the number of LEO systems that have coverage limits of the northern parts of Canada, he's wondering how these will cover any of the higher latitudes, or how you will cover any of the higher latitudes. Is he right or is he wrong?
I seem to remember reading that SpaceX had gotten approval for a polar constellation that would provide coverage at the higher, for the higher up there. That I think came out little over a month ago or so. I think they were polar constellation. I think they've even launched some of the satellites to provide that service. I think Jeff mentioned earlier he was a user of the SpaceX network. I'm sure he's giving a lot of beta feedback for it.
Yeah. Well, another question. What are the benefits of bringing Ka-band to the solution? Tony, I think that's one for you to answer.
Yeah, the Ka-band is a great solution for these communities because it provides a wider band carriers, and the cost per megabit is much lower typically than the existing transponders that are there. But you're able to provide, much larger carriers into some of the traffic can distribute from there. Like some of the communities up there, we have some very circuits going into them that we still do channel bonding or carrier bonding and provide huge links into individual communities.
Well, we've got a question come in here. Somebody's asked whether both of you can comment on some of the positive outcomes of connectivity coming to underserved areas. What does the world stand to gain when we're all better connected? Bit of a tricky question, that.
Yeah.
I don't know who wants to have a first crack at that.
I was hoping it was going to be Richard, but
I'm sorry, I'm having connectivity issues, so I couldn't really make out the question. Can you repeat it?
Well, I'll read the question again. Somebody's asked, can we discuss some of the positive outcomes of connectivity coming to the underserved areas? What does the world stand to gain when we're all better connected?
I do apologize. It's breaking up on my side, so I can't hear the question, Richard.
Oh, no problem. I think that what it does is it really helps, we're talking about the digital divide, and it helps to eliminate that by providing equivalency of services into all these areas that are underserved right now and don't have the same opportunities to enjoy the connectivity and the possibilities of what they could do with that connectivity. I mean, it's really important that that access be provided for these remote communities wherever they may be globally, and getting access to the same level of information that we have everywhere else, where they don't have it today. And I'm happy to have been able to participate in a project that helped us provide those services out there.
Now, during the roundtable, Jeff was going on about Ka-band, bringing Ka-band to the solution. What are the benefits?
The benefits are the additional capacity that's available up there right now. There's a lot of available C-band as it transitions out of there, but we know that the C-band is some of those frequencies are going to be disappearing, or the abilities, the access to those. But there's a lot of Ka-band coming online now, and was online before, but capacity is disappearing. But the cost per megabit is much less, and also our ability to, with our particular equipment, to create those links where we're doing load balancing across the Ka-band. Our acceleration and load balancing equipment interact with our modems so that we know exactly the capacity available on the link at any time because of the ACM that's being applied to those links. So we can dynamically load balance across them. It's one of the great solutions we're able to offer on this particular network as well.
Right. Well, we've got several questions that have come in, but they're mainly directed at Jeff. So I think we'll get Jeff to follow up on those later. But I think, Richard, I think we're just about at the time now to close this out and move over to the networking session. So Richard, would you like to make some closing statements?
Sure. Thank you, Richard. And my connectivity came back just at the right moment. So good. I hope we've been able to demonstrate today, together with Jeff and Tony, that Contech is at the forefront of bridging the digital divide and help unserved and underserved communities around the world to get online. It made us incredibly proud to team up with such a great and innovative company like SSI Canada to bring connectivity to the Nunavut community. This is truly one of the most fulfilling parts of my job here at Contech. Every day we connect many places, businesses, and things around the world with our satellite solutions, but nothing brings me more joy than to see the meaningful impact connectivity has on people in communities that's been living without adequate access to the internet for far too long. So please come and talk to us how we can help you with your connectivity challenges. We have solutions that range from high throughput, high performance trunking, like we've discussed today and delivered to SSI, to very cost efficient platforms for ultra rural connectivity, like Wi-Fi, community Wi-Fi that came up earlier. With that, I would like to thank the audience for listening today. Special thanks to Jeff and SSI and the people of Nunavut for sharing your stories, and to the entire Contech family that helped make this project happen. I'm very proud. Back to you, Richard.
Well, all I'd like to say is thank you very much, Tony. Thank you, Richard, for doing the Q&A session. There are some questions that haven't been answered. They're mainly directed at Jeff, but what I would like to emphasize is that Tony and Richard are available to connect with afterwards in the meeting rooms. If you haven't set any up, you can use the impromptu thing. If you don't wish to do that, please get in touch, contact directly with Contech, and they can help and solve your issues with bridging the digital divide. So on that note, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.